Hello everybody and welcome to Author on the Loose. My name is Sandra Schwab and I write historical romance. In other words, I am the author on the loose. A few years ago I already had a podcast, but I tended to record these very long episodes, which took ages to record and they took even longer to edit. And it was all a major nightmare. And after a while, I just had to give up because it was becoming too time consuming and I had to do other things. Then recently, I've heard from a few other authors who are doing so-called walkcasts. So, in other words, they are walking about their town, or they are walking. Some of them walk around the countryside, if they live in somewhere where they can easily access the countryside, and they do recordings of themselves. Or some of them drive about and do recordings of themselves. And I thought, well, I could do that. These episodes seem to be relatively short and there doesn't seem to be a lot of editing involved. So, yes, I can definitely do that. And so I've decided to give this podcasting business another shot. And that's how the idea for Author on the Loose was born. On the show, I'm going to present you with a mixture of readings from my novels, as well as talks about various different subjects, such as who are my top 5 fictional heroes, or what are ways how you can jumpstart your creativity, things like that. And I'm going to record some of those musings on the go, hence they will be called Musings on the Go. If they turn out to be really horrible, I'm just going to stop because I don't want to torture you. But, well, they might turn out to be a lot of fun and they might turn out to be quite nice and perhaps even wonderful. No, probably not wonderful, but, well, nice, decent. So, we'll see how this goes. In this first episode, I'd like to talk a little bit about how I came to write historical romance. It all started when I was 7 or 8 years old. I've always been a voracious reader, and when I was 7 or 8, my mum gave me my very first historical novel, and that was a German children's story called Caius der Laus aus dem alten Rom. It was about a group of children who lived who lived in Rome during classical antiquity, and I really liked it. And so in subsequent years, I read a lot of retellings of classical epics as well as medieval romances, and I loved them all a lot. And then one day, the local bookseller recommended The Eagle of the Ninth to my mom for me. We had this really fantastic bookseller in Waldkirch. That was the town in the Black Forest where we lived when I went to primary school. And so she recommended Rosemary Sutcliffe's The Eagle of the Ninth. As you might know, Rosemary Sutcliffe was an author who was really famous for her historical fiction for children. Most of her novels are set in Britain, and she really liked Roman times in particular. And The Eagle of the Ninth is set in Roman Britain, and it basically, as a background, it deals with the vanishing of the Ninth Legion. And I read this, and oh my God, it was love at first sight. It was just so wonderful, and I think it must have been Rosemary Sutcliffe's novels which made me fall in love with Britain. Her novels were also the first ones I read where I thought, when I'm grown up, I want to write like this. Something that particularly impressed me about Sutcliffe's novels, and something that still impresses me about her novels, is the way she evokes images in the reader's head. and these images are very, very powerful. I mean, I still remember things, and it's been over 25 years that I read most of these novels, but I still remember scenes and, you know, emotions and sights, and that is quite powerful. And I knew right from the beginning, you know, I want to write books like this. I want to write books that are so powerful. I want to write books with images that stay within the reader for such a long time. During my teens, I continued to read historical fiction, and I quickly switched to read historical fiction for adults because I had basically read everything available in the children's section of the bookstore and the library. So there was only one, you know, option to start reading books for adults. And I think the very first historical novel for adults that I read was Noah Gordon's, I don't even know what's it called in English, Der Medicus. I'm sorry, I should have looked this up. At the time, it was, and this is one of the funny things, at the time Noah Gordon was a really famous author in Germany. He wasn't really all that famous in the US and in the UK. That only happened a bit later. But anyway, that was the first historical novel for adults that I read. Incidentally, it was also the first novel I read which included a love scene, which was interesting. Kind of short, the love scene, but nevertheless, interesting. I continued to read historical novels, and I quickly found out that I really liked historical novels that had a strong romantic subplot. For example, I really enjoyed Gillian Bradshaw's The Beacon of Alexandria. And I also enjoyed novels which had an even stronger romantic subplot. For example, or, you know, not just a subplot, but, you know, the main plot was very romantic. For example, Penelope Williamson's Keep of the Dream, which I read as a historical novel, or Victoria Hole's The Devil on Horseback, which I also read as a historical novel. But I found it really difficult to pick novels that I liked, because while on the one hand I stumbled across these novels I loved so much that had this all this romance going on the other hand, I, you know, kept picking up novels where the heroine, well, she did have, in that one novel, she did have a love interest, but she and her love interest ended up on a tower, surrounded by their enemies, and their enemies are shooting arrows at them, and they have arrows sticking out of various body parts. And just before they kick the bucket, they the heroine and her love interest, that is, they swear everlasting and never ending and, you know, forever and ever love to each other, and then they die. That's not exactly what I call emotionally uplifting. Not by a long shot. And then I stumbled across a book, and that was Philippa Gregory's The Wise Woman. I stumbled across this book where the heroine was a witch, and a real witch. Even though this was a historical novel, she was like a real witch, so she could do magic and stuff. She was not a very likable character, which didn't make things any easier. And in the course of the novel, she started this affair. I think he was a baron. He was definitely, you know, of higher social status than she was. Unfortunately, he was already married, but who cares? And they had these really, really, really weird sex scenes. No, basically BDSM scenes in a mainstream publication, which was weird. Things got even weirder when it became clear that, you know, the Baron really had to, you know, have sex with his wife because he needed to get a male heir and all that stuff. So the heroine, the witch, she fashioned two wax dolls that that were meant to resemble the Baron guy and his wife, and the wax dolls had sex with each other, and at the same time the Baron and his wife had very strange sex with each other, and the wife became pregnant. And then after 9 months the baby was born, only it turned out to be made of wax, and I think it exploded during birth. Yeah, right, so that was the wax baby. And at the very end of the novel, the heroine knows, is burned at the stake, and because the heroine feels that she has led a really sinful life, she jumps onto the flames, into the flames, she jumps into the flames themselves and dies. The end. Yeah. That was still not the worst. The worst was the book with the goat sex. And there was more than one scene in which somebody had sex with goats. And there was more than one goat. That was traumatizing. And that was the point where I've decided, okay, I'm just not going to read historical fiction any longer because, oh my god, they have wax babies and goat sex and no, I'm not going to do this. Now, there might be a few nice things like The Keeper of the Dream and The Devil on Horseback, but I just can't, I can't seem to figure out how to pick these novels. So I don't want to come across any other goat sex scenes. So no more historical fiction for me. I made some exceptions, and one exception was the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. The other exception was Dorothy Dunnett's Slime and Chronicles. I love Dorothy Dunnett. So that was that. Me and historical fiction, we were through, more or less. And then one day, and that was in late 1999, I went to Frankfurt on a book shopping spree, and I always started my book shopping sprees in the English bookshop that was right behind the church St. Catherine's. What was particularly nice about this bookstore was that they had tables with new releases and they had genre sections. And that day in late 1999, I went into that bookstore and I ventured into the corner where I'd never been before. That was the corner with the really garish covers with like naked men on the cover and, women whose dresses were slipping off their shoulders and things like that. So clinch covers. And that day I went into that corner quite daringly and I picked up a book. And that book didn't have a clinch cover. I turned it around and there was the clinch, but the front didn't have a clinch, which was the reason why I picked it up. And that was Stephanie Lawrence's A Reichswoe. And I opened the book and I read the proof, and the proof sounded really nice. And then I opened the book and it was like, oh my gosh, it's historical fiction with a love story. Now that's interesting. And I bought this book, and that was the point when I realized about the existence of historical romance. I also realized that I had read quite a lot of, all those books that I had really, really enjoyed. Penelope Williamson's Keeper of the Dream, Victoria Hole's Devil on Horseback, that these were actually historical novels. I just had read them as a different genre. So I read Stephanie Lawrence's Reichswoe, and oh my gosh, it was such a revelation. At the time I was studying English and German literature in Mainz, at Mainz University, and when you study literature, you read all these depressing things where women die in classic German tragedies, we have all these young, innocent maidens dying in Schiller's Kabale und Liebe, sorry, Kabale und Liebe. The heroine, Louise Müller, she is poisoned by her lover, by her aristocratic lover, because he thinks she is in love with another and he doesn't want anybody else to have her. And so he poisons her with lemonade. Yep. And then there's Lessing's Emilia Galotti, in which this young middle-class woman is pursued by this horrible noble rake. No, and he's really horrible. And I think he's even a prince. Can't really remember. In the end, he corners her in his palace, and rather than letting herself be seduced and become a fallen woman, she either stabs herself or she gets her father to stab her. I'm a bit hazy on the details. It's been a really long time since I read this. So she ends up dead. I mean, it would have been more logical to stab the prince, but no, she is the one who ends up dead. And then there are, in British literature, you have things like Tennyson's The Lady of Shalott, where the lady ends up dead, floating down to Camelot. I really like The Lady of Shalott as a poem, but it's a bit depressing. Or Browning's Porphyria's Lover, where you have another male lover killing his female lover because he doesn't want anybody else to have her. Very loving. And it's just also very depressing. All these women dying and all these women being punished for transgressions against, the order or whatever. And it's just, gosh, it's just depressing. And when I read The Rakesvow, it was, as I said, it was a revelation, because there you have this female character who actually survives the story, and not only that, she also has sex out of wedlock. She's not punished for that. There are no goats. The sex scenes are actually pleasurable. They're actually nice. And even more, it's historical fiction. And that was the point. From the get-go, I was in love with that genre, and I really felt that it was a genre that was empowering women, that was empowering the female character. Because in The Rakesvow, the heroine is the one who seduces the hero to seduce her, and she's the one who then spends the rest of the book, kind of telling him, no, I actually don't want to marry you. What are you talking about? And he has to convince her that he is good enough for her, and he has to convince her that it would be really nice if she would marry him. And I really liked that, and I really liked the power relations in historical romance. I like that the heroine always gets the hunky guy in the end. I like that most historical heroines, or most heroines in historical romance, this way around, are very strong characters, actually. At least the heroines in all the good historical romances. A few days after I bought A Rakesvow, I started to write my very first romance. And yes, that is how I became a romance author. I hope you've enjoyed this first episode, and I hope you will join me again for the next episode. Bye bye.